Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I'm your host, Mark Caberti, founder of the Content Marketing Plaza, bringing you 3 new episodes each week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. And before we jump into today's episode, let me ask you a quick question. How much would your life change if you could make 6 figures from your content? Imagine being able to quit your 9-to-5 job, do what you love for a living, and spend more time with your family. That's what we help our students do at the Content Marketing Plaza, an 8-week program that will help you build your way to 6 figures via your content. You can learn more about the Plaza by heading over to contentmarketingplaza.com, which will be in the show notes. All right, let's jump right back into the episode. We all have a message, a product, or a service that we want it to reach out to more people. And a lot of people think that is all there really is to marketing. Just we have this thing and we want it to get out to more people, spreading the word. But there is so much more to marketing than that. There's creating a culture. There's thinking about the people who we are marketing to. There's just so many other elements that go into marketing. We're going to talk about that, give you a concrete picture of what you can do to level up your marketing and your whole mindset with it. In today's episode, we have a really special guest who has been inspiring me very early in my entrepreneurial journey. He is the author of 19 international bestsellers that have been translated into over 35 languages. His body of work has changed the way people think about marketing and the work that we produce. And by focusing on everything from effective marketing and leadership to the spread of ideas and changing everything, he has been able to motivate and inspire countless people around the world. So in case you couldn't guess it, today's guest for episode 292 of the Breakthrough Success Podcast is none other than Seth Godin. Seth, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, thank you, Mark. And I want to just take a moment here to commemorate the fact that you said 292 episodes. Congratulations.
Thank you, Seth. It's such an honor to have you back on the show. I mean, again, you have had the biggest impact on me out of any entrepreneur who I've been able to encounter in my journey. So thank you so much for the impact and all of the people who have read your books. And I mean, we know that you have a new book out. This is Marketing, and I recently read it. I think it's a really great book. We will include that in the show notes. But Seth, can you give us a little bit of the background of why you wrote the book, This is Marketing? Because I know there are a lot of different ideas you could have chosen for your book.
Yeah, I don't wake up in the morning thinking, what should my next book be? Books happen to me, and sometimes I can't wiggle out of them. It's easier to just write a blog post. In this case, I decided it was worthy of a book because a book is still a magical totem. No batteries required. It's a sum of a group of ideas that you can hand to somebody and say, this is what I am thinking right now. And it occurred to me that over the 30 years I've been writing about the shift in marketing, we have lost our way, many of us, thinking that marketing is about interrupting people, taking from people, scamming people, pushing people, pressuring people, that I read about people using the word marketing as if it's a negative thing. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was time to make it really clear to people that not only does marketing work, it works the best when we do it with people and for them. It works the best when we make things better by making better things.
And I would like this focus on creating a change that has a positive impact on your segment, on your community. And I mean, you mentioned this right away. You talk about that whole interruption culture. You spread it out throughout the book, what marketing used to be. But you mentioned right away that too many marketers spend most of their time running a hype show, trying to get just a little bigger. And I feel like that can relate to a lot of people right now. So how can we go from anyone who's in that hype show, adjusting their mindset so that they can focus on making a culture instead of just making more hype?
Okay, so there are 2 parts to this. The first one is the idea, incorrect, that the way you market is by your idea going to the people you target. In fact, every successful brand and business and service spreads because people tell one another, not because the creator told them. That what we get to do is build a culture of people who establish that people like us do things like this, who can establish that culturally this is the next thing. And you do that by showing up with something that people want and are looking forward to.
And I mean, again, like one of the big focuses in business marketing is that focus on that person on the other end instead of us trying to push our message out. And going on that trend, I mean, you define marketing in the book as the generous act of helping someone solve a problem. And one of the things you highlight also is that we have to solve our audience's problems. So how can we get more clear on what problems our audience is having?
Well, if you're hoping that there's an easy shortcut, I think you're being naive. This is the only hard part, Mark. This is the part where you bring practical empathy to the table and you get past the I'd buy it and get to this person who believes what they believe, who wants what they want, who knows what they know. They want this. That insight is the hard part.
And I mean, it makes a lot of sense because if you just create a product and hope you get lucky, maybe you do get lucky, but that's very unlikely to happen. If you know your audience's problems, it's definitely a lot easier. And a lot of conversations with people can really dive deeper into what kind of problems people are having. And I feel like part of this is being able to see from the other person's worldview, being able to better understand their thoughts, what they're thinking right now, instead of just thinking our worldview is their worldview. And this is something you also cover in This is Marketing. So I'm wondering if you could give us a glimpse into how we can learn to see the worldview of the people who form our audience.
Well, you can learn a lot just by noticing. And if you can assert that the people who don't do what you do might be right, it gets a lot easier. Why would someone wait in line at the post office instead of printing at home with technical software that prints their own postage, right? Every day, millions of people stand in line in the post office. Why would someone wait in line at a toll booth instead of having an easy pass? Why would someone take the train instead of flying somewhere? We can go down this huge list of things that people do that we don't do. And we can say they're stupid. Well, they're not stupid. They're just different than you. And what you do as an entrepreneur, as a marketer, is invest the emotional energy to imagine that the other person might be right.
I mean, that's like when I first read that part of the book, I mean, it's easy to think like if you don't have the easy pass, like what are you doing? But I mean, they are right in their own way. I mean, people have different worldviews. They come up with conclusions differently. And I mean, it's really hard to get someone to support you on your journey or even be a part of it if your method of doing that is to say, you're wrong, this is the right way.
Right, but that's where the arrogant, narcissistic, scammy mindset of the marketer kicks in, because they're busy saying, I just need to tell more people. I just need to get the word out. Well, actually, no. Getting the word out isn't working for you. People are aware that you are there as an option, and they're still not buying it. That's because you didn't do the hard work of accepting them for who they are, going to where they are, building a culture that makes it easy for them to tell the others.
And like getting that whole insight into the other person, that potential customer who has all these different thoughts running through their heads, that's definitely one part of the marketing. But another big part is that trust factor. How much do people trust you? Because we do buy from brands that we know, like, and trust. So I'm wondering if you could share a little bit how exactly can we do a better job of getting in front of our audiences and building that trust?
So let's agree that trust and attention are the two scarce resources. Not steel, not shelf space, trust and attention. And the way we earn the first bit of trust is by having frequency of attention, showing up. But after that, trust is earned by making promises and keeping them. If you make a promise and keep it, you get a chance to make another promise and keep it. And if you keep making big promises and keeping them, more people will trust you.
And I mean, I really like this focus on promises, because if you keep a promise and people see that, then that's going to build a reputation where this person keeps their promises. And I mean, I mentioned earlier, like just recently, it creates that whole expectation. And you mentioned that a brand is just this idea of what your customers' expectations are of that brand. And part of creating that expectation is knowing what exactly your brand should stand for. So I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about how exactly do we figure out what our brands should actually stand for. Some of us are creating a lot of content, but we're not thinking like why or what exactly does this even lead up to?
Well, you know this, but let's go over it. A brand and a logo are different things. A logo is just a symbol. A brand is a promise. And what we are promising to do is change things. That's what it means to be a marketer, is to make change happen. So you get to pick what change you stand for. What change do you seek to make in the world? Who are you trying to change? And if you can be clear about who it's for and what's it for, you can be really specific, then you have a foundation to start with.
And I mean, I really like the idea of starting basic and having that foundation, because I mean, when some people think about these really deep questions, like what should my brand stand for, they can get really deep into it, but you really have to have the concept in mind and then just put it out to your audience and see what happens. I mean, I feel like that's a really deep part of that, just like not having it perfect, but just being able to put it out to your audience and see what happens.
Well, let's be clear about this. There are parts of it that do need to be perfect. The parts where you are coherent with the assertions that you are making. So if you say, we make sterile surgical tools, and you start shipping surgical tools that have botulism on them, that isn't about being imperfect or the minimum viable product. That is sloppy. That is malpractice. That is easy to address. But if you go to market and say, we believe there is a market for triple sterilized tools, and you bring triple sterilized tools to surgeons, and surgeons then say, nah, double sterilized is enough for us, you made an assertion and you were wrong. That is the kind of imperfect that's totally appropriate. To put something in front of the people you seek to serve to find out if it actually serves them.
And I mean, thank you for that deeper analysis, because we do want to make sure that we're fulfilling our assertions, and after we fulfill our assertions, do that, then we can see what necessarily happens with the product. And I mean, one of the things that also happens, and you also mentioned this in the book, is that we sometimes get bored with talking about the same things, sticking with the same story. So a lot of people, they do change things up a little bit, sometimes too fast. You can see this in the person who, let's say they have this one big idea, and then they're tired of doing that. They go on to this other big idea, and they're just bouncing from idea to idea, from product to product, without it really going anywhere and without really being able to attract a core audience. So I'm wondering, how exactly do we stick with the same stories, stick with the main message that we currently have without constantly changing it around because we're bored of continuing to talk about it?
Yeah, it's a great point. My late partner and friend Jay Levinson said, you don't change your marketing when you get bored with it, and you don't change it when your spouse gets bored with it. You don't change it when your employees get bored with it. You change it when your accountant gets bored with it. And I think that's good. It's good advice. You know, you should change your logo as often as you change your nose or your name. You stick with it and you stick with it and you stick with it. And the same with the people you seek to serve. Now, you might be in a dead end, in which case you have to get out of it as fast as you can. But if you're on the path, you need to stay on the path, because starting is fun, but finishing is the hard part.
And you mentioned something really important, which is staying on that path. And this is where you get these expressions like enjoy the journey, love the process. But I feel like it's really hard at times, as you mentioned, like that finish is hard, especially when maybe there are people who are juggling the business with family, with work, and other things like a 9 to 5 or something like that. So for someone who they may have started, they're working on it, but they're really not at that finish line yet, what advice do you have for them that they stick it out and get to the finish line for this ambition that they are passionate about?
Most people who have this problem picked a business that was too big. And it's much easier to stick with a business that's working. And the kind of business that's going to be working is one where the scale of the business is appropriate to how much resources and effort you can put into it. So if your job is to be a figure skating coach, it's one thing to say, I want to be a figure skating coach that coaches in the Olympics. It's another thing to say, I want to be the most in-demand and powerful ice skating coach in Williamsville, New York. Because in that environment, you got a shot. You stick it out and stick it out and stick it out. Within a short period of time, you're going to be the number one coach. Once you're the number one coach, there's huge value that comes from that, because everyone in town wants the number one coach. And that's enough. That establishing that you want to, be the next Uber or be the next Amazon is nuts. Because unless you are extraordinarily well capitalized and have a significant team of people who are crazy in terms of how much effort they're willing to put into it, you're not going to beat Amazon. Don't try. You're not going to sell more books than Michelle Obama. Don't try. Instead, figure out the people you need to serve that matches the resources you've got available and obsess about that.
I like this focus on, you mentioned you coined the term smallest viable audience, where instead of like going for this big everyone, we just focus, and we really narrow our focus on a few people. And I really love the concepts, but for people who they aren't really sure about how do they approach that, how would we determine who our smallest viable audience is and then actually starting that dialogue?
Yeah, I don't think the hard part is committing to the who. I think it's just committing to it in general. So if someone said, hey, Mark, your podcast can only reach 1,000 people, which 1,000 people is it for? You ought to be able to acknowledge that answering that question is important. Once you've done that, then you have a commitment. You're forced to choose. And once you choose, everything will get better because you will make something for someone specific, not a general thing for something amorphous.
And I really like how you crack down on that. Like, it's one thing to think of, okay, one day my podcast is going to get millions of downloads, or one day my YouTube channel is just going to completely go viral. It's something else where you really think about, hey, what if you only could reach 1,000 people, but you could pick anyone? What kind of avatar would you pick? What kind of people would you want listening to your show or watching your channel or buying your product? Because that'll really allow you to get deeper on who exactly should you be reaching out to and being more conscious of the communities and opportunities you have to start that dialogue and build the relationship with the people of that audience.
Exactly. And I think that work is hard enough to do it without making commitments. Making commitments makes everything much more straightforward.
And I like that idea on the commitments because when we don't, when you don't have commitments or you have the wrong commitments, you could feel like you're walking a little blindly in certain moments. So once you have the commitment, it definitely is a lot more clear on what it is that we have to do. And like some people, they are very clear on what they want to do. They're very clear on where they want to go, but for some reason, they're not quite there yet. So with that in mind, I'm wondering, what do you believe holds most people back from reaching their full potential in the area that they're pursuing?
Well, it's fear. It's always fear. That's easy. The hard part is specifically, right? And in this case, the fear is if you make a commitment, it might not work. If you make a commitment, you might then have to turn around and say, nope, I failed. But the alternative is to not make a commitment and fail anyway. So my argument is this practice of committing to an audience, committing to the promise of your brand, committing to show up, it's better than not committing. So if you want to go get a job, go get a job. But if you're not going to have a job, I think it's essential that you build a structure around this commitment.
And I mean, making a commitment is very strong already, but that structure I really like that idea where you create this structure, you're more clear on what it is that you have to be doing, how you have to be doing. There's just so many more things you could do once you have that structure around you. And I know that on this journey towards unlocking our potential, fear is definitely a really big part of what holds a lot of people back. But also throughout that journey, there are going to be certain challenges we face. And I know challenges are just constant, but they do make us better. So, Seth, I'm wondering if you could share with us one of the challenges that you have faced on your journey to becoming a 19-time best-selling author and some of the lessons you've learned.
Well, the first year was very tough. I got 800 rejection letters in a row. I didn't understand who the book proposals were for. I thought my job was to invent books that the public would buy. This was incorrect. Making an average book for the large masses of average is not going to work. I then realized that the person I needed to persuade was the 50 editors that I was trying to sell to. If they didn't think it was a good idea, I never got past them. And then the question was, who do they look to see if it's a good idea? And then I realized the person I really need to please is the owner of the bookstore. This is before Amazon. Because if the editor thought the owner of the bookstore was going to be happy, they would buy my book. And if they didn't, they wouldn't. So that was a huge lesson that I learned. It took me a year to learn that. Then an entrepreneurial project I did shortly after that, I discovered the value of the smallest viable audience. I realized that the top 200 law firms had a big problem, which is they didn't have enough people to hire because they could only hire students from the top 15 law schools. I also realized that the students at the top 15 law schools had a problem, which is they couldn't tell the law firms apart. So I made a book that was given free to every one of the top law students, and I sold ads in that book to the top law firms. That's a smallest viable audience, right? I only had 200 possible customers for my entire business. So if I wasn't making them happy, my business was going to go away. And realizing who I sought to serve, how I was going to engage with them, that was everything. And the first year I did that project, it did very well. The second year it did better. And then I realized I hated working with law firms. So I got rid of the project because you become like the people you serve all day. And I decided I could focus my energy on serving a different group of people in a way that I was proud of.
Wow, lots of really powerful insights just in this one answer. There's a lot of stuff throughout the interview, but diving in a little more, like you become like the people who you serve, and that makes sense because you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And if you're serving someone, you are spending a lot of time with that person, especially if that individual is a top customer. And also the fact that, it's a little different now with self-publishing, where you can directly reach readers with your book. You publish it. There's no barrier, but with the publishing, just thinking about you boil it down to the owner of the bookstore. That's a really different conclusion than the readers, which obviously you still serve through your book, but knowing that the book owner is really one of the key people for that whole decision-making process and getting approved by the publisher. So it's really interesting how you really took it to a granular level and just really broke it down like that for us. I mean, I know publishing, it's not what it once was, but that can definitely be applied to other areas also.
It applies to every area. And too often, naive marketers make one of two mistakes. Either they think, oh, it's my job. Whatever they tell me to market, I'll market, which is absurd. You're responsible. If you're not proud of it, don't market it. And number two is the mindset that says, well, it's pretty good and it's our turn. We'll put this in front of people and we'll make some sales. That used to work, right? If you're a movie theater and you only sell one kind of popcorn and someone's already at the movies, you can sell them any kind of popcorn you got because they're at the movies. But most of us aren't in the movies and most of us aren't making popcorn. Most of us make a product or a service where people have a choice. And if they have the choice, they're going to take the choice.
And I mean, just again, like really deep insights. I mean, it gives us a really deeper idea of how to think about cultures and how to think about the people who we are offering our products to, really thinking about that other person and some of their worldviews. So, I mean, really insightful. I know in your book that you have a whole list of books at the end that you recommend. So this is marketing that, I mean, it's got like at least a few full pages of book recommendations from Seth. But I'm wondering right now if you could share 3 books that you believe will have a positive impact on us.
Well, if you're an entrepreneur, I hope you'll read this book because it was worth writing and it's worth reading. I think that a book called Business Model Generation is profound. You've probably read it before, but it will change the way you think about how to be an entrepreneur. And the last one will surprise some people because I've criticized this book, which is called The E-Myth Revisited. And I've criticized it because it pushes entrepreneurs to build companies around dumb jobs. And I think it's worth reading so you can make the choice about whether you want your company to be filled with people who are easily replaceable or whether you want to build a studio filled with people who are irreplaceable, because you got to pick one or the other.
Seth, thank you for sharing those great book recommendations. Those will all be in the show notes, marketbirdie.com/E292. I will also throw in the link to Content Marketing Secrets, which is at marketbirdie.com/CMS book for anyone interested. Before we wrap up this episode, Seth, I've asked you so many questions throughout our time together, but what do you believe is one question that we need to be asking ourselves more often?
Is it worth it?
That's a really great question to ask ourselves. I mean, it really gets a little deeper into basically like each action we take and really being able to prioritize and really being able to think of how this will impact our culture. So that's a really great question for us to keep in mind for anyone who wants to learn more about Seth. I mean, you could just Google Seth Godin, a lot of things will come up. His newest book, This is Marketing. It's on a few places, Amazon and others, but the link to that is Seth's, seths.blog/Tim, with the Tim standing for This is Marketing. So seths.blog/Tim. Seth, is there anything else that you want to include in that and anywhere other places where we can find you as well?
Just so pleased you took the time. Thank you for doing this on a regular basis. 292. Go, go, go.
Thank you so much, Seth, for being a guest on the show. I mean, so many great insights with us today. Just thank you again for coming back on the show. You've had a really big impact on many people, myself included, especially very early in my journey.
Cheers. Go make a ruckus.
Want to dominate the podcasting industry? Now you can with your free copy of my book, Podcast Domination. You'll learn how to launch, grow, and monetize your very own show. And whether you are a beginner or an expert, this book has a lot of golden nuggets for you. We'll cover the cost of producing this book. All we ask is that you cover the shipping. To get your copy, head over to markguberti.com/PD.